Joining me live now is Simon Welsh, the director of Redbridge Group, as we do every week. Simon, it's got to be all about climate this week. What are voters saying?
Yeah, g'day, Laura. Yeah, unsurprisingly, there was a lot of talk about climate in the groups this week. It was fascinating, really. Often when we're sort of in that topic, you get a choice of, are we debating whether it's a economic frame, about economic opportunity? Are we debating, that Australia's doing enough or too much? This week, the debate around climate change has really been framed by trust of the Prime Minister. The net zero plan's really been greeted in that frame of do we trust this bloke that's asking us to believe in this plan? And it seems that really the only people that are believing in it are the people that feel threatened by it. So we're seeing in regional communities concerns about heading in towards net zero, whereas in the sort of the Liberal centre and left flank in those metro marginal seats and so forth, it's disbelief.
That's amazing. Given that what happened at the last election, I think Labor in many ways, at least they feel they were treated like the government in a sense, expected to come up with all the answers. Is there a higher watermark among Labor voters, an expectation for what Labor will do with climate?
There really hasn't been a lot of focus on Labor in a general sense. They're presenting a very small target at the moment. I mean, this will change as we head in towards a campaign and the government draws attention to that. At the moment, really the biggest issues for Labor at the moment are around its invisibility on some of these issues. So voters are wanting to hear from Labor and they're wanting to hear an alternative vision. So they've got an opportunity to fill that gap. But, you can rest assured the government will be drawing attention to this as we move closer to the next election.
Look, I think Labor got a little bit burned on a lot of the detail last time in the lead up to the election, so perhaps they'll have another strategy there. Just finally, before we move off climate change, what is the big risk for the major parties? You talk about Labor. Obviously, they don't hold any of the areas that the Nationals do, but they need to win seats to win the election. Do they continue on at least the track that they're on at the last election, or do they need to change tack?
Well, the thing I think has become really interesting is we hear a lot of talk in the groups about sort of building a more self-sufficient Australia. We've got this opportunity to rebuild from COVID. I hesitate to use the hackneyed expression "build back better," but that's kind of the sentiment that we're hearing. And a lot of voters are attaching climate change to that. So I think if you can frame it in that way, you'll have something that will really appeal.
Really interesting. What about submarines? You'd think that this wouldn't be a big vote changer at all, but is it being seen through the prism of diplomacy and leadership and Morrison himself and his character?
Yeah. Again, it's a really interesting distinction. So there's certainly parts of the country and sort of voter cohorts, as we call them, but that are really sort of responding to the Australian national interest argument. That's why we've changed. And, and there's stuff that's happened over the last couple of days with, the sledging of Australia will play for that voter cohort. But again, on this sort of central flank of the Liberals in these metropolitan middle-class seats, what we're seeing even before the weekend's events was a view of how our actions will impact globally in terms of our reputation and those sorts of things. But then you'd be having a conversation about subs and then suddenly you'd be talking about Christian Porter's blind trust. And so what people are doing is they're really sort of seeing this as a suite of issues that speak to integrity. I would expect that we'll be hearing a lot about integrity and climate change in those sort of metropolitan, middle-class, Liberal-held seats going into the next election.
Well, I guess that's why Labor has been talking about a federal ICAC. But when you talk about integrity and when you're talking to voters about integrity, are they kind of just lumping all politicians in the one basket, or are they making the distinction between parties and people?
Yeah. Again, in those middle-class metropolitan seats, there is a very pointed conversation about this government you move out of those areas and the conversation does become, they're all tarred with the one brunch, and certainly ICAC and these sorts of things, the eyes glaze over because it's baked into the impression in those areas. But yeah, in these middle-class metropolitan seats, there is a special pointedness to the discussion, because a lot of these voters are Liberal voters, lifelong Liberal voters, and they kind of feel let down. They feel let down by the behaviour of this government, but also the sort of the form of conservatism that this government has been bringing.
Very interesting indeed, Simon. It's going to get to the pointy end very soon, so we look forward to talking to you each and every week. We'll see you soon.
No worries. Thanks, Laura.